Hey, this is Antonio. Welcome back to my channel, and we're going to add some fighting words. But before we go any further, I need for you to like this video and please subscribe to my channel. So the question everybody wants to know is, what's next for George Kambosos? And, the minute he became the unified champ, and Teofimo Lopez lost, it's still blowing my mind that he offered Teofimo, hey, we can have a rematch. Let's just have a rematch. And we can go to Australia, but we could have a rematch. And Teofimo says, well, no, I just want to go up. I think, I honestly think, a few days have passed. I think he's now kicking himself for that decision and for saying that. I feel like, rematches are always great. And I feel like you can always get a lot out of a rematch, money wise. Not to mention, how much of a back and forth it was. There's the real possibility maybe he can do it. The only way that a rematch works is if we, as consumers, believe you can win. You didn't win the last time, but you won this time. It's the only way it works. And when you look at that fight, I mean, it was a pretty close fight. Personally, I believe, George Kambosos, he did his thing. But I believe if Teofimo Lopez isn't coming there trying to just knock his head off, and he fought differently, if he fought more composed, and if he fought more like the way he fought with Lomachenko, if he had more distance, I honestly believe the fight could have gone a different way, or even could have been more competitive, to say the least. So I just think it's kind of weird that he didn't accept the rematch. If you feel like that, you won, naturally you would say, yeah, I want the rematch because I feel like I won. So sure, I want the rematch. And it was weird to me that he said, I'm just gonna go up. And granted, listen, shout out to Teofimo Lopez. You know your body. If you feel like you can't make this weight anymore and you feel like it's killing you to cut down to make this weight, then by all means go up. Your health is the most important thing. But the question is, who's next for George Kambosos? I mean, Ryan Garcia hasn't stopped saying, "Hey, I want that, I want that, I want that." I I don't know if anybody's like looking at Ryan Garcia like that anymore. I feel like he's got too much stuff on the outside of boxing, to be honest with you. And I think, as Floyd Mayweather would say, for George Kambosos, I think Ryan Garcia is easy money. I mean, he only has a hook. I think it's a right hook, but he only has a hook. He has a okay jab. He's not consistent with it. He sits way too still. He stands up straight. His chin is up in the air. I mean, honestly, like he's easy money for George Kambosos. I I don't even know. I just can't picture Ryan Garcia beating George Kambosos. I mean, out of that whole squad, Teofimo Lopez, Tank, and Devin Haney, and like Shakur Stevenson. I never thought Ryan Garcia was like at the top of the heap. So for him to say, I want that fight, I mean, sure, if it could generate enough money, if I was George Kambosos, but if I was in Ryan Garcia's camp, I'd be like, no, we got to fix some things before you get in there with that guy. Not to mention, you've had a lot of time off, and I believe he had a surgery. So I, I don't really know about that. I don't foresee that happening either, to be honest with you. I don't foresee that happening. Um, for some reason, George Kambosos is really keen on looking at Devin Haney. Now, he constantly says this out of respect, and he wants to unify. And I believe that. I truly believe that. But at the same time, I feel like he might see something in Devin Haney that he could exploit. And I mean, I see things in Devin Haney that George Kambosos can exploit. Again, the same thing I talked about when it came down to George Kambosos and Teofimo Lopez. I just think the pace alone is going to be a lot for somebody like a Devin Haney. Uh, I think Devin Haney's big, but I think George Kambosos could eke out a victory just on points, just on points alone. I don't think Devin Haney has the strongest chin in the world, but I mean he's never been put down. So but I think he would definitely have to tweak some things. Like he'd have to have a really solid game plan. Um, One person I think everybody should just maybe bring into camp is Kenny Porter. I've been screaming Kenny Porter a lot because he knows how to teach people how to tie people up, and I think that's very important. A lot of these guys, they just don't really know what to do, and if you're going to fight somebody like a George Kambosos, you might want to learn how to tie people up. And I mean, quite frankly, for this camp, I'm going to do a fight breakdown for Devin Haney and I cannot think of his opponent, Jojo Diaz. Which it's funny the way people are talking. They're like talking over Jojo Diaz. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know what that dude is? That dude does not play. Like, so some people say well, Linares was Devin Haney's toughest test. I agree, it was, and he gave Devin Haney some problems. But where Linares didn't keep his foot on the gas, Jojo Diaz will more than keep his foot on the gas. But not only that, he's big enough to keep his foot on the gas. He's big enough to stand in front of Devin Haney. Devin Haney, he can get a little big. He's one of the bigger guys at that weight. But Jojo Diaz, listen, anybody who he's a slick guy, but on top of that, he's a heavy hitter. You know, he's a heavy hitter. He has great upper body movement, like the whole Canelo thing, where I'm going to plant myself and I'll move up here, so I can stay in position. He doesn't have the best feet, but hey, this I think if anything that Teofimo Lopez taught us or reminded us about is don't overlook opponents. And I feel like Devin Haney and George Kambosos, they're like chit-chatting and like, hey, we're going to do this next. And it's like, you got to get past that dog. And that dude is a dog. That dude is not to be played. Like, he is a dog. So he's the type of guy who will eke out a victory. He's the type of guy who can turn it up in the last round. He's the type of guy who will not back down. He's the type of guy where you're going to have to completely either shut him out or shut him down. But you're not going to be like, I'm going to smack him around here and I'm going to do this in this round. No, Jojo Diaz is a dog. He's a live dog. And to see George Kambosos and Devin Haney sitting there just talking about what's going to happen next, I think we should wait to see if he gets past this test and in what condition, if he gets past this test, in what condition will he be in? Because you might get past the test, but that test might be so hard, you'd be like, you know what, I need like 4 or 5 months of just resting. I'm not doing anything for the next 3 months. So I don't think the whole let's just jump into what's going to happen next is a good idea. I mean, it's great to look ahead, look to the future, but to look over people, I don't necessarily think that's the greatest thing in the world to do. Not to mention, there's other guys out there. There's other guys out there. I mean, I get it. You want that belt. I get it. And you two seem to have like a mutual respect, a rapport. You clearly have talked to each other, here and there because they seem really cordial and everything like that. He seems to be really cool with Devin Haney's dad. So I get it, but one thing that George Kambosos did was he starts saying what I hate when fighters say this. Oh, if it makes sense, what does that mean? Well, what does if it makes sense mean? So back in the day, if it makes sense never existed. You want to know what back in the day when people fought? They fought when two guys had a belt. That's when they fought. And then if one guy didn't have a belt, it was because he was ranked number 2. So that's when they fought. So this whole if it makes sense, Is the guy ranked number two? Is the guy ranked number 2 or 3? Is the guy available and is he ranked number 2? If he's ranked number 2, what's there to, if it makes sense about? It definitely makes sense if he's ranked as your next opponent. And if the guy has a belt, then it definitely makes sense. Like, you're in this to unify. You want to be in a Hall of Fame one day, right? So I hate that business talk. If it makes sense, and we'll have to see if everything makes sense. And it's like, how about you just fight? How about you just fight? How about you just fight the number one guy? How about you just fight the guy with the belt? How about that? I feel like we'll win as the fans, and I feel like you'll win because we'll love and respect you more because you're taking on all challengers. All challengers. Not him or not that guy, but that guy behind him, and all challengers. We'll like you a whole lot more if you just take on who the top dog is or who has the belt. Period. That's what we want. That's one thing I really admire about Terrence Crawford. Whoever number 2 is and whoever has the belt. Let's I I I mean I get it. The Mayweather era kind of messed things up. Let's just call it spade a spade. Mayweather era messed a lot of things up, and that type of talk messed things up. You didn't hear the guys like Ali and all those guys like if it makes sense. They didn't say that. You didn't hear Lennox Lewis and Holyfield and Tyson like if it makes sense. You didn't hear none of those guys saying that. You didn't hear Duran and Hearns and Hagler like if it makes sense. Nowadays it's like, well, if it makes sense, so what does that mean? So if this guy is really popular, but he's ranked number, I don't know, 7, that makes more sense than number 2? Or that makes more sense than the guy over there with the belt? No, that doesn't make any sense. And that's the reason why people won't be watching boxing. They'll be watching UFC on that night because it didn't make sense to them, but you thought it made sense financially. If you get away from that mentality, the people will still love you. I mean, honestly, Floyd Mayweather doesn't have a belt, but every time he fights, everybody tunes in. So get away from that whole if it makes sense thing. Just get away from that. Let's let's just see a good fight. But those are my thoughts, and you tell me who you think he should fight next. Drop it down below, and as always, please like and please subscribe.